Hello, everyone. I hope you're having a fantastic day. My name is Kmart, and I want to talk about some basketball. And today, we are going to be talking about the Golden State Warriors and the uh, current situation that they sort of find themselves in as a team, and maybe how they want to approach moving forward through the rest of this season and potentially into the next one as well. So, we're just going to sort of jump right into it. If you don't already know, the Warriors are um, struggling a little bit. Maybe not at the bottom, but not quite where they want to be. They're below 500, still by a couple of games, 12 and 14 at the time of recording, and they have some pretty big issues um, in terms of their roster and how they're playing. But they can't really afford to give up on the season at the moment. So realistically speaking, they're kind of stuck. They're kind of forced to just try and play through some of their current issues and power through this and hope for the best. The Warriors have had a combination of sort of old age and injuries stacking up. You have questions that haven't been answered about some of the younger developing players on the roster, and obviously Draymond Green, who is a pretty sizable part of that team in terms of presence, leadership, and defensive prowess most of the time, has been suspended for an indefinite amount of time. So the Warriors are kind of treading water at the moment, trying to stay afloat, and I'm going to take a little look at sort of why that might be. First and foremost, though, we will go through the good part for the Warriors, and that is that Steph Curry is still incredible. Right? He's been playing unbelievably well. He is on pace to very easily be an all-star again. 28 points per game, just shy of 5 rebounds, 4.4 assists, shooting 46% from the field, 41% from beyond the arc. Unfortunately, he did just recently have his string of consecutive games with a three-pointer broken, but kind of a novelty stat there. The point is, Steph Curry is still playing incredibly well. He's still sort of an anchor that the rest of the Warriors can presumably build around. The question is, what does the rest of the team sort of look like around Steph? The questions for the Warriors have really revolved around that supporting cast. First, the questions about Klay Thompson, obviously coming back from both the Achilles and knee problems. I think it was Achilles first, then knee, but two massive injuries that have by themselves ended the careers of other players. Klay had both of them and still came back, but there were some questions, right, about how well he would play, how explosive he could be, whether that would affect his game. And for most of the season, it did appear that, he had been sort of slowing down a little bit. His scoring had been down. He had been taking fewer shots overall. His field goal percentage was dropping. Over the last couple of games, we've seen him pick things up. So the question at this point is not whether he's capable of getting back to his old sort of scoring ways. He very clearly is, based on his stat lines over the past week or two. It's a question of whether this is a legitimate adjustment or not. Has Klay figured out how he needs to play now post injuries compared to where he was before, so that he can keep this production up over the long term or not? We're not sure yet, simply because it's too small a sample size to know for sure. But at least for that question, there's a semi-encouraging answer at the start. A little bit less encouraging is what's going on with Andrew Wiggins here. He does appear to be sort of going backwards in terms of his scoring and his offensive load. His point total is down pretty significantly. I think it's from something like 17 or 18 points a game last year to around 12 right now. His rebound and assist numbers have dipped a bit as well, and his percentages are down pretty much across the board. Field goal in general, 2-point, 3-point, all of it's kind of trending downwards. So Wiggins is not quite handling the scoring in the way that he did in years previously. And if you're a Warriors fan, or the Warriors themselves, that's when you would maybe start looking to some of those younger guys, some of the players that you have developing on the second unit, who could maybe slowly but surely be shifted into a bigger role. But as has been the case for a while with the Warriors, their young players are very much up in the air in terms of how reliable they actually are. Kuminga would probably be the primary sort of, not suspect, but candidate here for the Warriors in terms of a guy that they could lean on, but his potential hasn't quite broken out into full-on reliability, right? If you take a look at his numbers, Kuminga is not doing poorly, but he hasn't cracked 20 points more than 2 times this season, I believe. Yeah, just double checking that. Twice this season he has scored 20 points or more, and he has recorded more than 6 rebounds just the one time. He's had multiple games with 6, but only one game where he was above that, which, you know, scoring in the high teens and pulling down 5 or 6 rebounds a game is still very good. That's something to not sort of lose sight of here. But if you're looking for Kuminga to be the third guy, if you're looking to put him up next to Steph and Clay, we need to see him more consistently do better than that, and we just haven't really seen it yet. So still questions about whether Kuminga can be a primary option here for the Warriors. Meanwhile, you look at some of the other guys in terms of young developing players, guys like Moses Moody, guys like Brandon Zimski. I'm still not sure how to pronounce that, but hopefully that's correct. They're still young, they're sort of up and coming players, but they're so young that they're still playing relatively minor roles here for the Warriors. Their minutes aren't particularly high. They are semi-regular parts of the Warriors' rotations, just not in significant roles, right? They have their moments. They're certainly sort of fan favorites as well, but they're not necessarily ready for a big step up in their minutes or production as of right now, from just sort of what I was seeing from the Warriors this season. So the young guys have potential, but we're not quite sure if they're there yet and ready to help this team compete immediately. You combine all of those concerns with the fact that the Warriors have pretty heavily regressed in terms of their defense. It's part of the reason why they're kind of stuck where they are. Back in their previous sort of championship winning season a couple years ago, they were the number 1 team in the league by defensive rating in the 2021-2022 season. They were 3rd in points allowed, 4th in steals, 7th in overall rebounds, including 2nd in defensive rebounds specifically. They were 2nd in field goal percentage against, 3rd in 3-point percentage against. So a lot of the times you think back on those Warriors teams and it's a lot of Steph and Clay, you know, Splash Brothers shooting threes and scoring lots of points, but at least in that last championship run, they had the backbone of a defense that could stand up against most anyone in the league. So it wasn't all just sort of offensive firepower. They had the defense to back it up. You take a look at their defense this season, that's not really the case. They're 16th in defensive rating currently. That may have shifted 1 or 2 over the last couple of days, but last I checked, they were 16th, and they're in the lower half of the league in most of the defensive categories. So they're not terrible, but they're hovering at or around or even below, in some instances, league average in terms of defense. And, well, if you have a league average or lower defense and you have questions on offense from everyone who isn't Steph Curry, the Warriors are not winning as many games as they would like. So now we get to sort of the big problem here. The reason why I say that the Warriors are kind of stuck and that they have no choice but to push forward and try and fight through this is that the Warriors cannot afford to give up. They can't kick the can down the road. They can't sort of take a punt on this season and say, you know, oh, we'll come back next year. They have an exceptionally high payroll, something in the realm of $208 million or so. So they are massively above the cap, massively above even the luxury tax threshold. And to get underneath that, they would have to move some pretty sizable contracts. You would have to move, you know, someone like Clay or someone like Chris Paul, multiple players even, in those instances to get under the luxury tax threshold and not have to pay that. So maybe that is something in the works, but it does seem pretty unlikely that they move on from any of their players, especially considering they're still sort of talking about sort of contract extensions or re-signing Klay Thompson, because he is in the final year of his deal, I believe. So the Warriors have a lot of financial constraints here. They're going to be paying a lot of money no matter what, unless they actually just trade the entirety of their starting lineup, which they are highly unlikely to do. So if you're going to be paying that much money and there's no immediate easy way to mitigate those costs, you really have no choice but to keep fighting. They also have a problem where they can't just decide to pack it in and tank the rest of the season, because they don't have full control over their own first round pick in the upcoming draft. For 2024, if I'm reading this correctly, the Warriors' first round pick is only top 4 protected. So, you know, if it lands in the top 4, they get to keep it. Otherwise, it gets shipped off, I believe, to Portland. I'll probably double check that later. But the fact is, if it's not a top 4 pick, the Warriors will not keep it. And if they did decide right here and right now that they were just going to tank for the rest of the season, maybe they do have a shot at a top 4 pick. But the way that the odds work for the lottery, it's not really guaranteed, and you would be tanking, still paying a payroll, you know, hovering at 200 million unless you slash costs massively for a chance at a top 4 pick, not a guarantee. And just to throw one last little thing on top, it's always a little bit overblown because basically people say this every year, but this upcoming draft class is rumored to not be maybe the deepest or the most skilled, right? I really don't like using the phrase sort of weak draft class, because these are all, you know, kids between like 18 and 21. There's not always going to be difference makers at first glance, but from the optics, there doesn't appear to be any sort of massive standout candidate that the Warriors would be willing to give up on this season entirely to go and get. So they've got way too much money invested in this roster to easily divest themselves. They don't control their own pick. Even if they keep the pick, they're not really sure if there's a candidate they can take who would immediately help them. All the while, the team is struggling. Their defense has slipped pretty massively, and on offense, everyone other than Steph Curry still has a giant question mark looming over their head. So the Warriors aren't in a great place, but they have no choice. They have to keep fighting. They have to try and figure this out. They have to hope that Steph continues to produce, that Klay Thompson's recent surge is legitimate, that Draymond Green comes back at some point and stops hitting dudes on the court, preferably off the court too. You know, who knows? But they need to get it together. That's the only hope that they have, because they can't afford to just sort of give up and say that this is a lost season and move on. So we'll see what they can do. They've won more than they've lost of late. 12-14 is still below 500, but it's an improvement over where they were just a little while ago. So the Warriors are worth keeping their eye on here, but as far as I'm concerned, they're not going to give up. They're not just going to start tanking and start losing games. They are going to fight as hard as they can because they have no other choice. But that's all I got. So as I said, we shall see. What do you think? Do the Warriors keep fighting? Do you think that the little surge they've been on recently is something that they can maintain? Have they turned that corner? Or do you think that they should try and blow it up? That they should try and move the expiring contract of someone like Klay Thompson? That they should try and move Chris Paul, though he's not 100% healthy right now, so maybe that complicates things. But should they just try and cut costs? Trade off some of those massive contracts and at least see if they can get under the luxury tax threshold and I guess rebuild for next season around Steph as best as they can. I'm not really sure what that scenario would look like, but please feel free to share your thoughts one way or another. But other than that, thank you all so much for watching. Happy holidays, and I will talk to you later.